So with that, I would say, let's get started and explore the wonders of artificial intelligence agents. And let's do that together. Now, to make sure you have a good and correct understanding of agentic AI, we first need to clarify what those AI agents are. In short, an AI agent is a piece of software service that uses generative AI to understand and perform tasks on behalf of you as the user, or maybe on behalf of another program. These agents use advanced AI models to understand context, make decisions, utilize grounding data, and in the end also take actions to achieve specific goals. Unlike traditional applications, AI agents can operate independently, executing complex workflows and automating processes without the need of constant human intervention. The evolution of generative AI enables agents to behave intelligently on our behalf, transforming how we can use and integrate those agents. Understanding what an AI agent is and how to utilize them is crucial for effectively using AI to automate those tasks, make informed decisions, and enhance user experiences. This knowledge enables organizations to deploy AI agents strategically, maximizing the potential to drive innovation, improve efficiency, and achieve business objectives. One example of such an AI agent is an expenses agent solution. Using the represented flow here on the slide, the agent would be used as follows. The starting point is the user. The user asks the expense agent a question about expenses. This could be driven from a chat-alike interface on a mobile device or maybe a browser app. From there, the expenses agent accepts the question as a prompt. Analyzing the natural language-based prompt from the user, the agent uses knowledge of expenses policy information to what we call grounding the prompt. From there, the agent uses a language model to interpret the prompt and generate a response. And that's what we call chat completion. And then eventually, based on the response, the agent can use its available tools, and we'll talk about that later on, to submit a claim to be processed and eventually generate a check payment. Now, obviously, this is only one of the honestly unlimited number and types of AI agent-based solutions you can develop using Azure AI. Other examples could be personal productivity agents. For instance, Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant that can help users drafting documents, create presentations, and even analyze data within your Microsoft 365 suite of products. Another example, you could build sales agents, helping in automating lead generation and customer qualification processes. They could schedule sales calls and assisting sales teams with closing deals by taking over administrative tasks. Maybe another example, since we're talking about developing AI agents, could be a developer agent on its own. GitHub Copilot is a great example of a developer agent, helping developers like yourself, maybe you're a DevOps engineer, or a cloud admin, or overall system admin with code updates. Helps you with code documentation, and even writing unit tests. For most common development languages and scripting tools as well. Now, there are many different ways that developers can create AI agents, including multiple frameworks and SDKs, software development kits. This slide here lists the most common ones available today, although some of the features that you have here on the slide might still be important, supported, but still in preview. Now let me cover the core characteristics of each and one of them without exposing all the details, as most probably that would take me another one-day course and on its own to just do that. Now that said, it might be a good idea to maybe pause the video for a bit to make sure you can follow me in this journey of tools. So let's start with Azure AI Agent Service. Azure AI Agent Service is a managed service in Azure that is designed to provide that framework for creating, managing, and using AI agents within Azure AI Foundry. The service is based on the OpenAI Assistance API, but with increased choice of models, data integration, and enterprise security. This also allows you to choose both from an OpenAI SDK or the AI Foundry SDK to start developing your agents. Next to that, we have OpenAI Assistance API. The OpenAI Assistance API provides a subset of the features already available in Azure AI Agent Service and can only be used with OpenAI models. From within Azure, you can technically use the Assistant API using the Azure OpenAI service, but I would personally recommend you to use Azure AI Agent Service in that case, as it's providing more flexibility as well as greater functionality. The next option here is Semantic Kernel, which is a lightweight open source development kit that you can use to build your AI agents as well as orchestrating multi-agent solutions. The core Semantic Kernel SDK is designed for all kinds of generative AI development, where the Semantic Kernel Agent Framework is a platform specifically optimized for creating agents and implementing agentic solution patterns. Semantic Kernel is developed by Microsoft itself, by the way. Moving on more to the right-hand side, we got AutoGen. AutoGen is another open source framework for rapidly developing agents. It's useful as a research and ideation tool when experimenting with those agents. Now, if you're looking for tools to optimize the creation of agents that integrate, for example, with Microsoft Copilot or within Microsoft 365 environments, you should have a look at the one here below on the slide, of which the Microsoft 365 Agent SDK is the first one. Primarily targeting integration with M365, you're not limited to Microsoft 365, but you can actually deliver your agent to different channels like Slack, Messenger, Facebook, and other ones. One of my favorite AI tools besides Azure AI Foundry is Microsoft Copilot Studio. Microsoft Copilot Studio provides a low-code development environment that citizen developers can use to quickly build and deploy agents that integrate with a Microsoft 365 ecosystem or commonly used channels like again Slack and Messenger. The visual design interface of Copilot Studio makes it an excellent choice for building agents when you have little or no professional software development experience. And then last, Copilot Studio Agent Builder, which allows business users to author basic agents for most common tasks they have in mind. The cool thing about this tool is that you use prompts to actually describe the functionality you want your agent to have. Or you can use a visual interface to specify options, pretty similar to Copilot Studio itself, but less advanced. Now, out of the previous detailed overview, I don't want to scare you away and making you feel overwhelmed. In this course, we will focus on Azure AI Foundry, which is really the platform for AI development on Azure. Now, within Azure AI Foundry, we will use Azure AI Agent Service, which offers that managed service to start building agents in Azure. And then last, we will expand the capabilities of our AI agents using Semantic Kernel SDK. So now you know about the tooling and management interface we will use for our AI agent development. Let's discuss the components of an AI agent. Agents developed using Azure AI Agent Service have the following elements. It all starts with a model, which refers to a deployed generative AI model, like for example, OpenAI GPT or Meta Llama or similar large language models from other organizations. The model enables the agent to reason and generate natural language responses, basically responding to prompts. Know that AI Agent Service within AI Foundry does not support all language models available within AI Foundry itself. The next component is the knowledge tools. A knowledge tool is basically a data source that enables the agent to ground prompts with contextual data. Potential knowledge sources including internet search results from Microsoft Bing or using Azure AI search indexing, or it could also be your own data and documents stored in Azure storage accounts or maybe Cosmos DB, for instance. And then next we also have action tools. Action tools are programmatic functions that enable the agent to automate actions. Built-in tools to access knowledge in Azure AI Search, and maybe again Bing as an example, are provided, as well as code interpreter tools that you can use to generate and run Python code. You can also create custom tools using your own code, or why not integrating with Azure Functions. And then last, conversations between users and agents take place on what is called a thread, which retains a history of the messages already exchanged in that conversation, as well as retaining any data assets, like for example files that have been generated. Now, with all the main concepts and building blocks out of the way, let me close this first module by actually showing you how to start creating an agent within the Azure AI Foundry portal. In short, the creation comes down to the following steps. First, we're going to start with deploying our supported large language model. Next to that, we create an agent and configure some core parameters, like the name, link it to a deployed model, followed by defining instructions the AI agent should perform and specifying the tool connections for knowledge and actions on the other side. And then from there, if the AI agent definition is done, you can test it out of the playground, similar to what you might already know from Azure AI Foundry Chat Playground experience. And then last, you can connect your application to the agent and literally start using it, using your preferred development language code syntax. Now, while everything works on a PowerPoint slide, I'm sure you are eager to see these steps in action. And that's exactly what this demo will show you. By the way, if you have access to an Azure subscription, I would say feel free to follow along and let's build our first AI agent together. So in this exercise, we're going to use the Azure AI Agent Service tools in the Azure AI Foundry portal to create a simple AI agent that answers questions about our expense claims. Now you can see that here I'm actually in my Azure portal where the baseline I have in my environment is typically showing me my resource groups. Now, we're not going to use the Azure portal for now because what we need is our Azure AI Foundry. So I'm going to connect to ai.azure.com, and from there, I'm getting access to my AI Foundry dashboard, which now means that we're going to create a new project, and from there, it's going to allow us to continue building all the other building blocks, if you want, that we need in our setup. So we're going to make this quite easy. I select Create Project, and it's going to ask me for my project information. To help a little bit in my naming convention, I'm going to call this one the AI-3026 demo because that's in the end what I'm doing. It's the first one, so that's all fine. And I also going to customize my setup a little bit. Now again, there's nothing really wrong, I would say, with the pre-built or predefined naming convention it uses, like admin dash with some unique number. But in the end, if I'm working with multiple projects, it sometimes becomes a little bit confusing to me. And I'm just trying to help you as well to understand how this actually works. So in short, you can use the pre-built namings or you can totally customize this, which again is what we're going to do here. I'm going to call this the AI-3026. And let's call it again Demo Hub. And as you can see, it needs to be different from the project. I got my subscription, and just to follow my own naming conventions, let's call this one the AI-3026 RG4 resource group. I'm going to deploy this in East US 2, but for later on when I'm deploying my actual large language model, what's important is that not all language model versions are available across all Azure regions. So for now, if you're following along through this exercise, I would say East US, East US 2, Sweden Central, and then West US and West US 3 would be safe locations to avoid any issues later on. We're not connecting to any new services, and for now I'm not needing Azure AI Search. So I'm going to click the next button, and from here, there's a lot of interesting things happening. So first of all, and that's why I like to start from that Azure AI Foundry portal right away, what we're doing is creating a project and a hub. By the way, I'll talk about this leveling a little bit more in a different module. But what it's going to do besides creating like the core building blocks that we need in our Azure AI setup is now also creating, as you can see from here, it's creating the Azure AI service. It creates a storage account, which the AI service needs in the backend. And since at some point we're dealing with secrets, with credentials, with connection strings, with keys overall, the recommendation is moving that into Key Vault. So that's where now, out of this out-of-the-box project deployment approach, it's creating those resources for me. So I'm going to wait until all my resources have been deployed, and then from there we can move on with the next step. So with that, after just a couple of minutes, typically our project is getting created. So you might, if it's the first time you're actually using AI Foundry, you might get a few like tips and tricks, little balloon messages, right? So you could all close that information. Now, before moving on, let me walk you through a little bit of what Azure AI Foundry portal gives us, obviously in relation to what we need to cover in this training. So it starts with our project topology over here in the overview section, and what we need later on is our project connection string. Now, I talked about the fact that this should be moved into like a Key Vault, alike secret store, but you'll find out just for the simplification of my demos and doing the actual steps, I'm not going to integrate any of my demos into Key Vault. But if this would be your production environment, then obviously from here, keep that in mind to maybe move your connection strings into a more secret place to store them. Next to that, we also have our Azure OpenAI service endpoint. And as you can see, it's following the naming convention that we defined on our end, and then connecting to openai.azure.com. So if you use any interaction with REST API calls, for example, that would be the place to go. Now, are we ready to actually start integrating our agents? Well, not really. Why not? Because you might remember from the presentation, the next step is after we create our baseline AI service, we now also need to move to a deployment of a generative AI model. Now, at the same time, I want to show you something in my resource groups. So although I started from my ai.azure.com or the Azure AI Foundry portal, you could almost say that I didn't really create any Azure resources, but thanks to that wizard, it actually created those resources for me. So I got, again, my project, I got my hub, got my actual AI service, got my Key Vault, and again, my storage account. So the nice thing is that, or you could go into AI Foundry like I did, clicking around in that portal, and it's going to create everything for you, or obviously nothing would block you from doing the opposite. If you're already familiar with Azure resource deployments from the Azure portal, or preferably infrastructure as code, then obviously the project will show up in your Azure AI Foundry as well, just to make sure you know what's happening on the Azure side as well. So now let's move on, and we're going to deploy a new model. Now there's a few different ways to do this. You could browse to the model catalog over here. The part that I'm going to use is actually down here in My Assets, where the My Assets reflects assets linked to this specific AI Foundry project. So we select models and endpoints. We're going to deploy a new model. And as you can see, the list here is pretty extensive. But for the sake of my demos, I'm going to use GPT-4o, one of the more recent versions out of OpenAI. So the list is now becoming a little bit less long, right? You can find all the details about versioning, about revisions. I'm just going to accept the defaults. And from here, it's going to ask me a few deploy model settings to customize. It's asking for a deployment name. I'm accepting the default because it just makes it a little bit easier from a naming convention. But know that you can actually name your own deployment in whatever naming convention you want to follow. I know I'm playing with GPT-4o, so just to keep it easy, I'm going to keep that deployment name as the default GPT-4o as well. I select deployment type global standard, which means cost-wise, I'm paying per API call. All fine in my demo setup. I would say, obviously, if you move this into production, depending on what your future AI agent is going to do, you might need to modify those settings again. I could accept all the defaults. What it's going to do here is grabbing the most up-to-date version of this model. It's going to allocate it to the project because that's the one I have, and it's going to allocate a certain capacity of tokens. Again, the tokens is like the virtual currency in the AI world. So depending on the use case of your agent, you might again need to change those settings. I deployed my project in EastUS 2, so most logically, it's also deploying this model in that exact same region. So I'm just going to hit deploy. And from here, we can start using our environment. So now that we deployed our model, I would say we're almost ready to build our AI agent. So again, in this little demo here, I'm going to build a simple agent that actually answers questions based on a corporate expense policy. So what I'm going to do now is injecting my expenses policy document. Just an easy example, it's just a Word document that I have on the side. And then later on, our agent is going to use that to ground the data, as we call it. If you're following along, then you can have a look at our instructions in the exercises details of the course. And then you're going to see that this is basically nothing more than a Word document. So I'm going to download the file. It's in my download section. And then from there, we can reuse it a little bit later on. So I guess we got everything in place to start building our agents. So how does this happen? Within our AI Foundry portal, there is this new section, Agents. Now, don't worry too much about the fact that it's called Preview. It means that you like testing, working with newer technology. It's going to ask me for my OpenAI service resource. I select the one that we created a couple of minutes ago, and that's all we need from here. What it's doing is now automatically, without me specifying a lot, deploying a new agent, and from here I could actually start integrating with it, making changes to it. Now I'm almost fine with, again, the suggestions. So from here, you could actually turn your naming for the agent into something more descriptive. So let's call this one our expenses agent. All good. Oops, not good. Expenses agent. I'm going to hook this into my deployment, where for now my deployment that I deployed earlier is the GPT-4o model. And then next, we need to provide some instructions. So down here where it says, give your agent clear directions, that's basically tuning, like what is the purpose of the agent. You can make this as descriptive, as detailed as you want. For now, I think it's more than good enough to just define, hey, I want you, my dear AI agent, to answer questions related to expense claims. And then when we scroll down, that's where we have knowledge and actions. Now, again, this is just the first example. I didn't really talk much about all the details around knowledge and actions. That's what we're doing in another module in this course. Now, what we need here is an entry towards that Word document. So I'm going to select knowledge. That's where, like, hey, agent, this is where you find the information. And as you can see here, there are a few different options. Connecting to AI search, connecting to Microsoft Fabric, using Bing search or some external, in this case, TripAdvisor, I'm going to use the local option to upload my file. What it's going to do from here is creating a new vector store, and that's like AI machine learning language, you could say, to create a data endpoint and building up an index. I'm going to upload my file, our expenses policy, upload and save. We can now see that our little knowledge backend source, you could say, is recognizing that one single file. And that's literally all we need to do from here. Now, as mentioned in the presentation, it's all fine to do your development, or in this case, just setting up our agent. So I think it's just more than normal to now move to the next step, and that's actually testing the agent functionality in our playground. So I'm going to select Try in Playground. And from here, if you already used Azure AI Foundry before, you might already be familiar with the playgrounds, and you can see that inside the portal, it's actually jumping now from my agent section before into the default playgrounds. But this time, it's Agent Playground. So this is really the playground for my agent. Which agent? Oh, that's what we have here on the side, my expenses agent. So just trying to get you a little bit familiar with the different options in this portal. How do we test our agent? Well, let's say we have our expense policy. So maybe I'm interested in what's the maximum I could expense for meals. I'm going to run a question, which in AI terms or generative AI terms, we call this running a prompt, right? So my prompt here is, what is the maximum I can claim for meals? And I'm going to run my prompt. And then from here, my AI agent kicks in and it's providing me with an answer. So it's providing a pretty detailed description. The maximum you can claim is $50 per day, a little bit more explanation. And then what you might recognize from, for example, our Microsoft Copilot behavior is not only giving you the prompt response or what we would call the chat completion, but it's also pointing you to the source. So now I can actually still move into my source. It's not literally allowing me to open up the document, but it's going to show me the context and then specifically highlighting what's the response based on. As you know, we like having that conversational context. So what we can do within the same scenario is now asking the next follow-up question, what about accommodation? Well, now it's again thinking about it for just a couple of seconds, and it's already coming back with the next answer to my prompt, what we call again chat completion. The maximum claim for accommodation is $150 per night. And again, as you can see, it's pointing me to the source. With that, I think I showed you everything I needed to show you in this demo. We started with deploying our AI service and all depending services on the site using Azure AI Foundry Management Center, available from ai.azure.com. In the background, it's creating the Azure resources, which you could still manage just like any other Azure resource. Next, we deployed our GPT-4o model, followed by the baseline configuration of our first agent, and then extending the grounding of data, uploading some sample files, and validating with the test playground. So with that, let's go back to the presentation for the last couple of words in this module. This brings us already to the last slide in this module. Now, before I let you go, let's reflect on what you already learned out of this module. We opened this module positioning the fundamentals of AI agents, followed by that one slide, remember, covering several different options for AI agent development in Azure. And then from there, we started shifting our focus towards Azure AI Agent Service. And then closed the module with a demo in which we explored AI agent development within Azure AI Foundry. I really hope you enjoyed learning from this module as much as I enjoyed presenting it to you. Remember, we have a few more modules in this course, so don't go too far away as I'm inviting you to join me in this journey of developing AI agents in Azure using the next module.